Hello, welcome to Gardener's World and the most beautiful spring day here at Longmeadow. And these crocuses are not just looking really good, they're new. I've not seen them before. We planted them 2 years ago, and last spring we had that terrible cold weather, and then the rabbits came in and ate the lot. So this year, they've come as a gift. And there's always that thing with bulbs. You know what you want from them, but you plant them with a lot of hope, and by the time they grow, you've almost forgotten that they're there. Nige, come on. This week, Carol continues her look at our favourite garden plants and the people who devote their lives to them, with a celebration of cyclamen.
Do you love them?
I don't know how I'd live without them.
We shall also be visiting a plantsman in Yorkshire who has a passion for sweet peas, to see how he breeds new varieties.
Split the stigma into there and tap. Fold it all back together, and hey presto, we've got a cross.
Joe continues to explore gardens in the most challenging of locations, with a trip to the rocky, windswept coast of North Cornwall.
If you were to take that hedge away, the garden would disappear in 12 months.
Yeah.
It would just be covered with salt, it would turn black, and that would be the end of your garden.
And I'm going to have to take drastic action and say goodbye to old friends that have shaped this garden over the last 15 years. But before we look at disasters, let's do something positive, because it's time to sow sweet peas. Now, you can sow them in tubes and root trainers and various different ways, but over the years, I've found that getting small pots, these are 3-inch pots, and sowing a batch in each pot that gets planted out whole works ideal. And 3 is about right. These are hungry, thirsty plants, so not seed compost. General purpose compost is fine, but if you can add a little bit of sieved soil or sieved garden compost, so much the better, because the roots will start to engage with the bacteria and the fungi in the soil from the very beginning, and they'll grow better when you transplant them. Now, the sweet peas themselves. There are many, many different types of sweet pea to choose from, and you grow them all the same. I've got here Black Knight. Wonderful, rich, deep purple. There used to be a feeling that they had to be soaked, they had to be nicked with a penknife. I found that there's no need to do any of that at all. They will germinate perfectly well. Just popped 3 per pot. Now those 4 pots are going to make a wigwam. So we push them in there, lightly sprinkle a little bit of soil over the top. And now these go into a protected place to germinate. It doesn't have to have direct heat, but a windowsill is absolutely fine, or a porch. And then as soon as the seedlings are established, put them outside in a sheltered place. And they will grow harder and stronger, and they'll adapt quicker when you plant them out. There we are, the first batch of this year's sweet peas. It's one of those plants that stirs some people to a lifetime of devotion. And I think Andrew Bean in Yorkshire would class himself as one of them. And not only does he grow sweet peas, but he breeds them.
I've always been interested in hybridising. I've got marble sweet peas, striped sweet peas, flake sweet peas, and I've got one bicolour tucked away somewhere as well. So the whole aim is to get something different. When hybridising, what we want is a flower that's not pollinated. Well, this one here, pull this down. I think this one will be all right. Its pollen sacs are intact, that's fine, that's okay. So we need to cut those off. So this is the hard bit. Right. we're going to go trim nicely. So we've exposed the stigma. Right, now what we need is something to put onto that, and we're aiming for a blue marble, so we want a marble flower or two. I'm going to have to go and get some flowers. Won't be a minute. So we want something that's got pollen already shattered, right? Usually about 3/4, that'll do nicely. So we're going to take that one. So we take the pollen from here. Don't see any marriage vows. We're just going to pull the wings back on that, like that, and just slip the stigma into there and tap, like that. We have got a little bit of pollen on there. Next, what we do is put it back together again. Bring it back. This is the hard bit. Right, and then fold it all back together like that. And hey, presto, we've got a cross. I'm the gardener of the family, right? So I do most of the gardening. I think my wife would have liked a more proper sort of garden with nice paths and things like that. We negotiated the patio, and she's now got a top patio, and I've got my sweet pea plot. So it's a merging of the two. Right, well, one way of saving seed, especially in a hybridiser's garden, is you need to get the seed to dry off, and we use tights, right? Tights are very good for drying off seed. I use different coloured ones as well, so that I don't get the seed mixed up, right? So we just put the seed pods in here when they're ready for picking off. You then get a big amount of seed in here, and as they dry out, right, you go along and you give them a little squeeze like this on all these tights, right? The pods explode, the seed ends up in the toe, and then when you want it, you cut the toe off and drop it into a seed tray here, and then we hand sort the seed. The thing that really grabs me are the different colours that you can achieve. This is a flake. You very rarely get flakes on the market, right? There's stripes here. There's a mass of different colours that you can go at. You can go for red on cream, right? Nobody's got red on cream, right? The ultimate is the yellow, but I'll leave that up to the genetic engineering to get that one, definitely.
This sunshine has brought the frogs out, and the pond is heaving with them. I counted about 30 in here. And it does show that if you can bring a pond into a garden, it doesn't matter how small, it attracts wildlife better than anything else. Now, time to get on. Here's some jobs you can do in your garden this weekend. Epimediums are a charming but shy woodland flower, and to enjoy them at their best, you cut away last year's foliage. And this will let light and air in and reveal the flowers in all their glory. It's time to sow tomatoes, and I like to sow another batch later in the month. You can either use a seed tray, scattering the seed thinly onto the compost, or sow the seeds individually into plugs. The advantage of the seed tray, it's quick, but you will need to transplant the seedlings as soon as they're big enough to handle, whereas those in the plugs need less handling and develop a better root system before they're potted on. Either way, put your seeds in a warm place to germinate. Broad beans can be delicious if picked young and are one of the easiest vegetables to grow. As soon as the ground can be worked, they can be sowed direct, either in double rows about 9 to 12 inches apart, leaving 2 to 3 feet between the rows so you can walk down and harvest them. Or if you're growing them in a raised bed like I do, they can be planted in a grid with each seed 9 inches apart. And I'd expect to see those appear in about 3 weeks' time. But I did sow some last October. These are aqua dulce, because aqua dulce are by far the best for an autumn sowing, and you can see they've grown well. The advantage of sowing in autumn is that you establish strong plants for the beginning of spring, so when the weather does warm up, they're ahead, and you get an earlier crop. The disadvantage is that they're prone to mice, to slugs, and to the vagaries of the weather. But it'd be interesting to see which gives us the best harvest. And to add to the mix, I did a sowing at the end of January and have grown these in the greenhouse. And when they're hardened off, which will be in about a week's time, I'll plant them where this kale is. So I'll have 3 lots, and I can do a comparison between the 3. The point, of course, is not so much the size of the harvest, but the timing, which is going to give me those first delicious baby beans at the end of spring. Now, one job that I must get on with here is to repair some wind damage to this Irish yew. You can see that it's leaning over, and I need to straighten it up. And then put a couple of stakes either side, and then hold it nice and securely, probably with some old hosepipe, because that's strong, but it won't damage the plant in any way, and allow a little bit of movement. But it does need to be fairly rigid, because you can see that the roots have been ripped up really quite close to the trunk. So hold it straight until the roots establish again, and that will be 3-4 years. And we get lots of wind here at Longmeadow, but I know they are nothing compared to the winds that batter the garden that Joe has been visiting on the North Cornish coast.
With its colourful, lush and very varied planting, it's hard to believe that this garden is perched on the top of a headland in North Cornwall. Now, it's a very still day today, but this spot would put the fear into the bravest of gardeners. Gardening here at the mercy of the elements is a real test. Gale-force, salt-laden winds are not the gardener's friends. But it didn't discourage David Isles. First impressions make it clear. He's managed to create a space on the edge of the Atlantic which encompasses an amazing array of planting styles. You've got separate areas. You've got your pretty classic herbaceous borders. You've got your cottage garden. You've got a dry garden.
Yeah, I don't like going into a garden and someone opening a door and saying, here is the garden, and you can see the whole thing. I think a garden invites you to go in and see what's round the next corner. And if you restrict yourself to just one type of gardening, then that's all you do. This is my dry garden, which in fact we call the Beth Chatto garden, because I read her book called The Dry Garden, and it seemed to be the sort of thing that would suit our sort of conditions.
A lot of people think of Cornwall as wet, as damp conditions. This is unbelievably dry up here.
Well, if you stood here in the middle of November with the Cornish gale, you would agree with the former. But in the summer, because it is so light and sandy, because it's blown on shore over eons of time, the rain just goes straight through it.
I have to say, the combination of plants is great. I love the crocosmia with the achilleas over there, and then the upright forms of the cordylines and the steeper over there. You've got a real eye for putting plants together.
Well, I think the eye needs shape more than colour.
And there's one crucial design element without which this entire garden would not be possible.
Someone once told me that if you live on the north coast of Cornwall, you can either have a view or a garden. So we decided on the garden. And if you're going to a garden where we are, the first thing you've got to do is to provide yourself with some shelter. And I heard that, in fact, one thing you mustn't do is to put up a solid obstruction for the wind. We get winds anything up to 70, 80 miles an hour here in the wintertime. And if you put up a wall, the wind will vortex over it and create more problems.
Yeah.
So you've got to filter the wind. That means you've got to find a hedge which will stand not only the strength of the wind, but also the salt. And so we did some research into various forms of hedging, and we ended up with Olearia traversii, which is a New Zealand plant, and which has become adapted to the salt environment.
And that is tried and tested, the Olearia, isn't it? Now, on a day like this, you know, it's as if there's no wind through here. What are you talking about? You know, wind?
Only 3 a day without wind, and you've chosen one off.
But normally the wind would just sweep right across here. None of these plants would
Well,
have
if you were to take that hedge away, the garden would disappear in 12 months.
Yeah.
It would just be covered with salt, it would turn black, and that would be the end of your garden. So it's not a luxury, it is absolutely essential.
And as you say, it now creates, you know, a particular environment within to grow a much wider variety of plant, and that's what it's all about.
It's quite amazing and a testament to David's ingenuity that even in a location as exposed as this, he's managed to create an exotic garden.
David, this is incredible, and it shows what a microclimate you've created here, because you've got some really exotic plants growing.
We started with the rockery. It's the only time we've actually done any designing. We laid out on a piece of paper the sort of shape we would like, and this is the result, and it's a joy.
So, David, a lot of people have tried and failed to create a garden in extreme conditions. What would your advice be to them?
Well, the most important thing is to do research. You really do need to, first know what soil you've got, then you need to know from which direction the weather is coming, and indeed where the sun is, if it ever shines. The reason why most of the Cornish gardens are on the south coast is because they're sheltered from the Atlantic salt winds. I choose to live in a place where I've got the salt winds, so I then had to take steps in order to create the right sort of environment.
It didn't stop you.
It didn't stop me, but then I'm an awkward bugger.
David Isles' garden apparently withstood the ferocious storms that it was battered with earlier this year, so the hedge was obviously doing its work. I'm putting this down because I've got to perform some surgery. Here at Longmeadow, we have a really bad case of box blight. I mentioned this last year. In fact, we first noticed it 2 years ago. And I cut out the affected parts and hoped that it wouldn't reappear, but it has. The weather we've had is ideal for the spreading of blight, which is a fungus. And you can notice it on your box by these chocolate brown splodges that appear on the leaves. And it can hit the plant in days. You see bare patches and you open it out and there is all this musty dead foliage. The news is not good, I'm afraid. Box blight has no cure. There is nothing you can do short of cutting out the affected areas and hoping the regrowth doesn't get hit. Well, if I did that to these hedges, they would just look ridiculous. All these hedges that I've had here for 14, 15 years, which define the garden, which are the heart and soul of the garden, now have to go. So this is the end of an era. I'll put that on the top one. You can see all these leaves could have spores on them that would spread. It's got really bad here, and I think that we may well losing all the box in the garden. But I can't stress too highly the need for hygiene. So this soil is now infected with box blight, potentially. So before I use it on or near any other box, I should sterilise it. That goes for any cutting implements. Gather up as much of the fallen foliage as you possibly can. Try and resist brushing past it with clothes or with dogs. I mean, this is why it's so difficult in a garden. In the UK, box blight is on the increase, but there are things that you can do to minimise the risk of infection in your garden. Only trim box when you know there's a dry week ahead, because spores can be carried by the rain and open wounds are more easily infected. Don't wet the leaves when watering. Point the water at the roots. And always keep plants well ventilated. I clearly remember the day I planted this hedge and put in these little cuttings that I had grown. And of course, in that 15 years, my children have grown up, our lives have changed, and it's all bound up with this garden we've made. And so taking it out is not just removing a few plants, it's the end of a whole slice of my life. But you have to accept that everything changes. You can't hold things back. And good gardening means going with it. And as I'm doing this, I can see for its start, the grass borders opening out look better. They're going to love that light and air coming in. And I had planned to put in another hedge along here. I'm thinking actually probably it'd be a good idea to leave it open. So immediately, something positive is coming out of it. Of course, I'm just cutting these off flush with the ground at the moment. But if I leave them, they'll regrow. And the chances of them being reinfected are about 99% because there will be spores in the ground for up to 5 years. So the next stage will be to dig out the roots. And then I can replant something if I want to. Well, this is all very sad, but at this time of year, there is so much to celebrate. And Carol is doing exactly that with cyclamen.
Across the British Isles, there are dedicated plants people who've helped shape what we see and grow in our own gardens. People like Vic Asplin, who's a trustee of the Birmingham Botanical Gardens, home to the most wonderful collection of hardy cyclamen. With their propeller-like flowers, from deepest magenta to brightest white, it's easy to see how these plants evoke deep passion in gardeners. Vic has been devoted to them for over 40 years.
It all began in 1972. I don't know why, but I ordered a couple of packets of cyclamen seed and the results were wonderful, so I started ordering more. And then in 1978, I heard that a cyclamen society had been formed.
Yeah.
And I immediately joined. And from there, well, shall we say it was all downhill. I was hooked.
All uphill, wasn't it?
With more and more cyclamen, and so it's continued.
And you're president now, aren't you, of the Cyclamen Society?
I am president, yes. See, I'm always getting into trouble.
As president of the society, Vic has helped promote cyclamen research worldwide, affording us a better understanding of this much-loved plant in our UK gardens.
I've now been on 5 expeditions with the Cyclamen Society to study plants in the wild. If you see the conditions in which a plant actually grows, that gives you a really good handle on how to grow it in cultivation in your own garden.
Let's have a look at your pictures.
This is a trip to Turkey in late February.
Look at that.
And the ground there is frozen, and yet there are cyclamen coum growing perfectly well. You wouldn't think any plant could survive at all, and yet remarkably they do.
Oh, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Although cyclamen do tend to grow in limestone areas in the wild, we found that in the garden, the pH of your soil hardly matters at all.
No.
You give them soil, they'll grow in it.
Do you love them?
I don't know how I'd live without them.
All those places that Vic visited, these cyclamen coombe would sow themselves around and there'd be infinite variation in them. All cyclamen open their seed pods at the same stage, and at that stage, the starch in those seeds turns to sugar, and it brings in ants from miles around. In they come, and they carry off these seeds in every direction. It's a really good insurance policy to make sure that those seedlings come up way away from the mother plant, so there's a wide distribution and everybody can survive. If you want to do it yourself, you don't want to wait for the ants, it's not reliable enough. But what you can do is get your own seed, and you just get a pot of gritty compost and sow it onto the surface of that. Then put some grit over the top, because this just helps the drainage and ensures that the seeds are in intimate contact with that compost. Water it well, stand it outside, and then forget about it. And eventually, they'll come into flower and you'll see exactly what you've got. Look at the variety there, the variation in the leaf and the flower colour. And that's the huge joy of sowing cyclamen from seed. You put your seed in, but you have no idea what you're going to get until one day, finally, they flower. Nigel Hopes cares for the cyclamen collection here at Birmingham Botanical Gardens. Like Vic, he's been hit by cyclamania. He's championing a rare new hybrid that's just come onto the market. I hear you're the next generation of cyclamen fanciers.
I suppose you could call me that, yeah. The thing I love about them is it's so nice to have something flowering in January, February, March when there's not a lot else happening. The flowers are like little nodding faces.
Yeah.
They're just beautiful.
But there've been lots of new developments, haven't there? Lots of new selections made.
There have been. This one in particular is called Ashwood Snowflake.
Pure white, dark stems, and that leaf is just
It's
out of this
absolutely
world,
fantastic, isn't it? I mean, you can imagine how well that will show up in the garden.
Yeah. So new, exciting. The love for cyclamen goes on and on.
Well, this box is not going on forever because the best way to get rid of box blight is to burn it. Well, that's the end of the box and the end of the programme too. Bye-bye. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. It's actually a very good time to be dividing snowdrops. They finished flowering, but they're still in the green. They're still full of life and vigour. So when you lift a clump and just pull it apart like that and replant them, next January, they will flower better than they would have done if you just left them where they were. Come on. Why, Nigel, is my ball in there? Nigel is working on the theory that if you plant a nice slimy little tennis ball, it may go forth and multiply. Hasn't worked yet, Nigel.
This week, Carol is starting a major new project, helping a young couple turn their empty patch into a beautiful garden.
We've got a year, haven't we? And you can do so much in there, and I really feel we can transform the place.
Joe is in Northumberland, meeting a gardener who's made a stunning garden despite having to deal with the extremes of hot, dry summers and bitterly cold winters.
I think that you can make a garden anywhere, whatever the conditions, providing you look at the native plants that grow round about.
Yeah, I can see why you moved here and did it. It's absolutely stunning.
And we meet a Cotswold grower whose boyhood enthusiasm for bees and butterflies has led him to amass buddleia in all their fabulous forms.
When butterflies come into the garden, they're actually looking for a nectar source. They're sort of on a pub crawl. They come here for the beer festival.
This pot should be giving me some spring colour, with tulips coming through, which will flower in a few weeks' time, and plenty of colour underneath. Well, as you can see, there's absolutely nothing, and the reason is I forgot. I could and should have planted tulips as late as January. I didn't. But the situation can be salvaged. You can still get spring colour into your containers as late as now, and the basis of the best spring colour, I think, comes from violas. Not a grand plant or fancy, but the colours can be so sumptuous. Look at these beautiful, rich, velvety tones. Because this display is only going to be here for about 6 to 8 weeks, we don't need a lot of very rich soil. But I'm just topping up what was already in here, as much as anything else, to raise the level. And then when it comes to the summer and autumn planting, all this soil will go and be replaced to give it new goodness. Now, the centrepiece is Euphorbia amygloides, which is a variety called Ephanthia, which I haven't grown before, but these amygloides are all fairly similar. And what they have is this good, strong, russet colour with the intensity of Euphorbia. No other plant gives you that electricity, particularly in April. So that can go in the middle like that. It's not going to get much bigger over the next few weeks. I've thought of adding heucheras, entirely for the foliage. This is a variety called mahogany. I think it's just purpley, magenta-y enough to complement the colours I want from the violas. But I'll pop that in there, like that. With large pots like this, the threes work very well because it gives room for a variety of plants, but it also gives it a rhythm. So we'll go here. Now, because I want an instant hit of colour, I'm going to cram every available space. There's no attempt to let plants grow into the space. This has got to work from the minute I plant it till the middle of May, by which time it can be exhausted. It doesn't matter. So it's a sprint, not a marathon. And we'll just open that out, and we'll just start to plant them in and around. Violas and pansies, the same family, but pansies are bigger and blousier to an extent, but I'm not looking for subtlety. I want strength of colour and a little bit of drama. Perfect for this mix. Well, I think that's looking good now. It'll get better over the next few weeks, but the truth is, this is instant gardening, and none the worse for it. But Carol is embarking on a project which is the exact opposite, because she will be guiding a couple over the next year on the development of their garden. They know what they want, but they don't know how to get there.
Dan and Dominique bought their first home together 3 years ago. With internal renovations over, it's time to tackle the garden. It's north-facing, and at 150 square metres, it's your average UK back garden. It's pretty much a blank canvas.
This is the year we're going to try and sort out the mud plane, as we're calling it.
It's about this summer we're going to get the garden fixed.
The gardens I loved when I was little were the ones that were completely wild, like cottagey gardens. It would be great if this was just a riot of colours and textures and, you know, height. So we'd like some lawns so we could sit out and have a picnic and play.
Dan and Dominique have made a start with some raised beds and some chickens, but they've got no idea where to turn next. This is their first garden. They want it to be a place where they can grow food, enjoy beautiful flowers, relax with their daughter, and entertain. So I'm going to spend the year helping them out.
We're kind of hoping that Carol's going to bring sort of knowledge of how we make the most of plants, which plants actually are going to work well together. So we would love to think we were up and running by the end of this season, really.
Their garden's already split into 3 main areas: a patio, an area perfect for a lawn, and a veg plot. I can't wait to get stuck in with them. Hello. Well, I'm Carol.
Hey.
And Dan.
Hi.
Hi. And you're Dominique.
Yeah, Dom.
And this is Finna. Hiya, Finna. And this is your veg patch.
Yeah, this is it at the moment, yeah.
So is that a big priority for you, growing your own
Yeah,
food?
absolutely. Yeah. I
definitely.
mean, we get eggs regularly, but we've never really utilised the raised beds all through the seasons. Like we have one hit in the summer, and that's it. And then it's like this for the rest of the time.
Raised beds are perfect for small spaces. And I know that this summer, with careful planning, these veg beds will be much more productive. But the other areas will be more of a challenge. Come and show me the rest of your garden. The middle section is where Dan and Dom want to create their lawn. It's also the place for them to indulge in flowers. I think the thing is, when you're taking on a new garden, you need to really find out about your soil. It's always going to be a sort of compromise. And sometimes, if you're lucky, a joining together of what you can grow and what you want to grow. So you've got quite heavy clay soil by the look of it. It's liable to be alkaline.
So does that push us down a certain type of plant? Or?
Well, if it is alkaline, you're not going to be able to grow masses of rhododendrons and azaleas. And anyway, they wouldn't go here. They wouldn't look right, would they? As you look around, you know, you've got this sort of little green tapestry beginning to emerge, but a lot of it is weeds. Now, their country name is pilewort. You can see why it gets its vernacular name. Every single one of these little rhizomes will make a totally fresh plant, so really we need to get rid of them. And that's true of any perennial weed. And a perennial weed is one that will just come up year after year after year. Dan and Dominique have their work cut out digging up those weeds if we're to lay a lawn next time I come. Meanwhile, I've spotted a plant that could be rejuvenated.
At our wedding, we had our table names as herbs, and at the end, a good friend of ours gathered them up and gave them back as a wedding present in a lovely planter.
I think you could resurrect it. Let's get rid of the moss, first of all. All you're going to do is bend these little branches down. But then if we pile some of this soil, which is loam-based, and it's much more the sort of thing that this would love. So I've just got the ends of these protruding, but it's still going to try and fling itself up. So if we just weight those little branches down with a stone, and we can do it with all of them, actually, right the way round here. And you should get new plants growing on each of these branches. So that's your first bit of propagating, your first new plants. And I think you need a nursery bed.
Yeah.
Somewhere you can divide stuff, push it in. Yeah? Shall we go and have a look? I brought you some snowdrops, so we'd be able to do that too. Because anything you get given, anything you want to divide, any seedlings you want to plant out, they'll just increase in size in here. This nursery bed will be a true investment for the future of Dan and Dom's garden. It's the first step for them to get growing.
It'll be very interesting to see how the garden develops over the coming year. Well, let's see how the pond is looking after its winter. it's been full of frogs, so the wildlife is good. But at this stage of the year, the important thing is to do a bit of spring cleaning. The water is still cold, even if the days are warm, so it's a bit early to be planting anything. Wait till the water doesn't feel cold to the touch, and believe you me, that feels freezing. The really important thing at this stage is to get rid of all the dead material, because it will rot down and make the nutrient levels in the water too rich. And that feeds the algae. And then there's a whole series of problems. Now, I don't know if you can see, but we've got a lot of leaves actually on the bottom here. Ooh, look at that gunk. That's exactly what you don't want in a pond. Decomposing vegetation. It's fine to be cleaning them even if you've got frog spawn, because at the moment it's in clumps and you can see it, and it doesn't mind being moved as long as you're just gentle. I've got water mint and water forget-me-not, which is spreading very well, and that's good for wildlife, but a little too well. So by weeding it back, I'm creating scope for more to grow and leaving some more open water. Rather than take this to the compost heap, where it will eventually go, I'm going to tip it out by the side of the pond for a day or so. And that's to let all the little creatures go back into the water, and they will. And it is actually teeming with life. There's a dragonfly larvae. Now, you can have a garden pond of almost any size in any garden, and they add a kind of calmness and balance to a garden. But Joe has been visiting a series of gardens that are working with extremes. And this week, he's in Northumberland, looking at a garden facing huge challenges.
Hot, dry summers and bone-chilling winters, Northumberland has the most extreme climate. And here in this hidden valley, the weather plays particularly harsh tricks, which makes gardening all the more challenging. But look at this. Huge borders, mainly built up of perennials in drifts and blocks, tearing up and combining beautifully together. Now, this is a frost hollow. It can get to more than 10 degrees lower here than the surrounding areas. It's a real geographical cold spot, which makes this garden even more impressive.
Garden writer Susie White and her husband David Oakley have been developing their garden here over the last 3 years. But the conditions have proved tough, even for an experienced plantswoman like Susie.
Susie, how extreme is the weather here? How cold does it get?
It's pretty extreme. It can be -18, we've known it in the winter, and +30 in the summer. So that's almost a 50-degree swing,
Yeah.
which really makes it difficult for plants.
So do you get a lot of snow here?
Yes, we get quite a lot of snow. We've been snowed in for 2 weeks, that's the most. Because we're in the bottom of the valley, the cold air runs down the hillsides and collects in the bottom, making it really icy in winter.
And did you know that before you started to garden here?
Well, I did have an idea, but actually the amount took me by surprise. Yes.
It looks great.
It's
I have to
beautiful.
say, I mean, you can plant on quite a big scale here. These borders are enormous.
I wanted to have the feeling of an exploded meadow so that it fits in with the local meadows and didn't look out of place. I have to make sure it's meticulously weeded in March, and then it's sort of set for the summer. And then once the plants have grown up, it means that they prevent the light getting and a lot of weed seeds. So
you're actually planting really densely
Very,
together. Are there any other advantages of that?
well, it prevents water loss off the soil. So in a place that gets so hot in the summer, that's very, very helpful.
Yeah. That's interesting that you pack the plants tighter to actually to retain moisture. You would have thought that they'll be taking all the moisture out of the soil.
Well, I suppose they are feeding on the moisture, but they're preventing water loss and evaporation from the soil.
Yeah.
And they're shading, so they're actually keeping the soil a bit cooler.
Susie's also cleverly designed her planting to work almost like a calendar, moving through from early summer to late autumn.
I had hot colours at the front, fading to cooler colours at the back to increase the sense of space.
Yeah, it's a good trick, that, isn't it?
To make it feel larger. So I literally just, painted with plants.
Yeah, you just had lots of plants. That must have been really good fun.
Oh, fun. And very free, like painting on a canvas.
How do you go about choosing the right plants? Is it trial and error?
I looked at the plants that were growing in local meadows and then chose cultivated varieties of those, as well as lots of native plants, so they are tough. There's the angel's fishing rods, which I never thought I'd be able to grow in this frost hollow, but they're surviving happily. I'm restricted by the amount of types of thyme I can grow. There's one thyme, though, that has done really well, and that's Thymus longicornis, and I've put it on either side of the path to the greenhouse, and it's spread in this huge mat, so that's lovely.
Now, what would your advice be to someone who faces challenges like this?
You can't get away from the fact that you need to work hard, but I think that you can make a garden anywhere, whatever the conditions, providing you look at the native plants that grow round about and try not to force a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah, I can see why you moved here and did it. It's absolutely stunning.
Thank you.
We've had some absolutely fantastic spring weather. And these warm days mean that the tender plants that I've been protecting all winter are growing well. And of course, it's a good idea to put them outside. But a word of warning. If you get good weather at this time of year during the day, it tends to mean cold nights. And the difference in temperature can be about 20 degrees or more. And this poor, tender growth is not yet hardened off. It's not equipped to deal with that kind of temperature shift. So if you're putting plants outside, have some protection to hand. Horticultural fleece is ideal. You could use old net curtains. Anything that can breathe, but will form a layer of warm air around the plant. And all you have to do, if you feel the chill coming on in the evening, is just wrap around the plant, like this fuchsia. If it's going to be windy, just tie it loosely with a piece of twine. And that's enough protection to allow that new growth to harden off. And in a few weeks' time, you won't have to worry about it. Now, you may not have any tender plants to protect, but here are some jobs you can be doing this weekend.
Slugs love a juicy young seedling and can rip through a whole tray of them in a matter of hours. If you set beer traps by pouring beer into a container or two and setting these amongst the plants, the slugs will always go for the beer and drown. It's tempting to hang on to every last seedling, but now is the time to be ruthless and thin them so that they are evenly spread and each individual has plenty of room to develop. And if you're growing in plugs or soil blocks, take them down to one healthy plant per unit. You'll get better plants as a result and save yourself a lot of time and trouble later on. Although the ground is beginning to warm up and you can start sowing salad crops now, they will germinate and develop slowly. However, if you put out young plants, and if you haven't raised any yourself, you can buy these, they will develop more quickly. Space them about 6 inches apart and then protect them from the cold with fleece or a cloche, and they'll give you a harvest while your seed-sown ones are developing.
I'm going to prune my buddleias. And the reason for doing this is not just to promote new flowers, because this is Buddleia Davidii, which flowers on new growth, but also to keep the shape, because if you leave it, it gets bigger and bigger, and the flowers remain taller and taller, higher and higher up, and down below, it's shaded out, and you just get this rather woody, untidy, scrubby shape. So we keep a good shape and have new flowers. About 10 years ago, I would have advised pruning it right down to the bottom buds and keeping it really compact so it was all new growth. But increasingly, I feel that it's better to just take off about a half or a maximum of 2/3 of buddleias. That keeps them bigger and also takes away competition for light from surrounding plants. Now, when you're pruning, the same rules apply to buddleia as anything else, which is that the weakest growth is cut hardest. So here we've got a really weak stem next to a really strong one. So the strong one, I'll just take off there and there. But the weak one, I'll take off right down at the bottom. There we go. Now, I've got quite a few buddleias here at Longmeadow, ranging in colour from pure white through to a lovely, rich, intense purple. But Andrew Bullock in the Cotswolds has got hundreds of them.
I think my sort of interest in buddleias goes back to when I was a child, coming home from school in my grandparents' garden. Every July, August, this sort of plant would appear, and then these wonderful creatures would land on it, which of course were butterflies. For anyone who's sort of interested in wildlife, then this plant is a bit of a must, really. When butterflies come into the garden, they're actually looking for a nectar source. So you can think of it that they're sort of on a pub crawl. Each butterfly's going looking for nectar. And when they come in here, they can have a drink, they can go to another garden, get another drink, they can top up. So if you've all got buddleias in your garden, the butterflies can do the pub crawl, and then they can come here for the beer festival. What they're trying to do, particularly in late summer, is build up for hibernation. We have all the hibernating British butterflies here. We have peacock, tortoiseshell, comma, butterflies that hibernate. We've got about 30 species, but over 100 cultivars. I think it's about 127. The spectrum of colours for buddleias is quite large. You can have white, all shades of blue, from a very pale blue, deep blue, into purple. There's some nice sort of pinks into maroon. And then the Weyeriana buddleia produces a lovely yellow plant later in the summer, and also a creamy apricot colour. So there's quite a good palette. This is one of my favourites. It's Shire Blue. It was one we bred here about 10 years ago. I like it because it's got really large, creamy blue panicles and really good grey foliage. It's a nice one to have at the back of a border because it can give you good height, or you can prune it lower and bring it more forward. I tend to prune buddleias April time. Some people like to do it at the end of winter, in February, March, but I find if you do that, then the buddleias bloom in July. By doing them a little bit later, say April, they then tend to bloom in August. That's the best time for attracting the butterflies. If you've got 2 or 3 buddleias, why not stagger the pruning? A good thing to keep the buddleia blooming is to keep deadheading it. If you're very clever, you can keep buddleias flowering from July right through to October. Where you've got a triangle of flowers and the 2 smaller ones either side haven't flowered yet or just coming into flower, and the one in the centre has gone over, take the centre one out, then the energy goes into the 2 side ones. Or if the whole head has gone over, take the whole head off, and then the plant will carry on flowering elsewhere. I feel that everybody should have at least one buddleia in their garden. They're beautiful things. They're good to teach children about wildlife. I mean, let's face it, if it wasn't for a buddleia back when I was a child, I may not be here now. What we must do is fill our gardens with nectar-attracting plants, and then we can do our bit for future generations so they can enjoy these wonderful jewels of the air, which is what we have here today.
Come on, you old softy. Come on, let's move this. It's already been a fabulous year for rhubarb. We picked rhubarb and ate it on Christmas Day. And what you see here is the third picking. When you're collecting rhubarb, don't use a knife, but pull it. You just take a stem, hold it at the bottom, and tear it off. Rhubarb has a delicious astringency. There's no pudding better than a hot rhubarb crumble. The crumble itself just slightly gooey. It's soaking up the juices. Absolutely delicious, maybe with a little bit of cream. Well, that is it for today. Bye-bye. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. The primroses have been fabulous this year. I think as good as I can ever remember them. And of course, the rain that we had over winter did them a lot of good. They like the damp as long as the drainage is reasonably good. And I always come back to primroses as my favourite flower of all, not just because of their simplicity and elegance, but because they're so full of hope. For me, this is the high point of the year.
And this week we've got plenty to enjoy. Carol meets a daffodil breeder who has spent 40 years rescuing heritage varieties, but has also bred hundreds of new varieties.
The real fashions at the moment are multi-head ones, different colours. The more modern ones, there are stunning shapes and colours.
We visit a dahlia enthusiast who's been growing show-stopping displays since he was a boy.
You can grow the ones which are no bigger than 2 inches across, right up to the giants, which are dinner plate size. They've just got that wow factor.
And Joe has been in Lancashire, finding out how to make a stunning garden from an inhospitable rock face.
There is a magical staging about a rock garden that you will never achieve with anything else.
Come on. I guess this is a situation that a lot of us have had to deal with, which is a honeysuckle that has not been trained well from the outset and has become a completely entangled mess. Honeysuckles are woodland plants and they want to scramble and twine and sprawl. We've got a number in the spring garden, growing up trees and through shrubs that are completely happy. So you can't change the nature of the plant. But if you get a situation like this, where it is definitely past any kind of reasonable training, you have to take radical action, and you can do with a honeysuckle. Now, this particular honeysuckle is Lonicera periclininum belgica, and it's got pink and white flowers that appear June, July. Now, all this top growth, where it comes up and then arches over itself like the crest of a wave, and in fact, in this case, climbing up into the Portuguese laurel, is a sign that it's got past a controllable point. What we want is just 2 dimensions only, growing up the wall along the wires. Now, it should be pruned immediately after flowering. So by pruning it now, there is a real risk that we may lose most of the flowers for this year. So that's just a warning. There's a nest in here. Now, this is last year, so I'm not destroying anybody's home. And this was a blackbird that produced its young quite happily in there, but I'm afraid it's time for it to go, so that can come down. There we are, lined with mud, so we'll put that on there. Now, let's get in. Well, of course, that isn't going to just pull away neatly. So what I need to do is cut away more and then take it out piecemeal. I suppose the crucial thing to stress is don't be frightened of a job like this. You're not going to harm the plant. You can apply it not just to honeysuckle, but some of the clematis, like Clematis montana, that can get really a tangle and mass of growth. But with the early flowering clematis, wait till after it's flowered, because it'll be flowering in a month's time. Wait till it's flowered, and then as soon as it's done, you can apply this operation to it. It is important when you've done a major prune like this to give it a really good drink. Honeysuckle like dampish feet. They don't like to get too dry, and then mulch it so it gets a bit of a feed. And it will start growing again and will very quickly re-establish itself. We planted these pseudo-narcissi about 15 years ago, and they were very slow to develop. I remember there was an original 50 bulbs and just 2 or 3 flowers, and gradually they've built up over the years. And now they're getting established, and I know that in about 20, 30 years' time, this will be a sheet of these lovely, delicate yellow flowers. Carol is continuing to look at the iconic plants of our gardens and the people who've devoted their lives to developing them by a visit to a daffodil grower in Cornwall.
Cornwall is a rugged county, renowned for its floral landscape. But in spring, the ground is set alight with a gorgeous, brilliant yellow of a million daffodils. Born into a dynasty of daffodil growers, Ron Scamp has dedicated 40 years of his life preserving and promoting these blazing beauties. And it's because of Ron's preeminent work and his enduring passion that gardeners now have access to an extraordinary kaleidoscope of colours and forms.
I've been involved with daffodils for almost all my life.
Yeah.
It started when I was a very young boy, when we lived on the farm.
Like many children in Cornwall, Ron's childhood was filled with daffodils. Flower farms dotted the coastline, and it was during this time he developed a deep passion for heritage varieties.
During the war years, all of these farms, the flower farms, they were ordered to remove daffodils from their fields so that they could grow vegetables. They couldn't sell them, so they got deposited in hedges and banks and places like that. A great deal were lost or still remain in the hedges.
These things that were almost on the point of extinction are being brought back now by you and people like you.
Some of these old ones, they really have a soft spot in my heart.
Very special, isn't there?
Absolutely, yes.
About heritage varieties.
Indeed.
So this is one of these heritage varieties. It's beautiful.
Yes, this is Bath Flame, and it's one that I used to pick as a lad.
I mean, what is it about the quality of the flower that's so very special? I mean, the clump is gorgeous, elegant, isn't it?
It's got that lovely bright colour, and of course it's got those beautiful petals that wave about in the wind.
And if it weren't for you, we wouldn't be able to grow this. I mean, you have got that eye, haven't you? You've got that sort of discernment.
I've got that passion, shall we
Yeah.
say.
Yes.
And yeah, I'd like to think that I saved it from extinction.
It's a very, very beautiful thing to pass forward to future generations.
It is indeed, and we hope to keep it going.
Ron has helped save scores of heritage daffodils from being lost forever. But his work doesn't stop there. He's also at the forefront of breeding new varieties, and he's recognised internationally for introducing some of the very best modern hybrids into our gardens. That's what you call a splendiferous daffodil, isn't that lovely?
Yeah, it's gorgeous. This is Gallipoli Dawn.
This is your trial field, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. This is where we plant out all our unnamed seedlings.
So every one of the plants in here is from crosses that you've made?
That's right, yep. They're all crosses and going back almost 20 years, some of them.
Really, as long as that?
Yes, yeah. Well, it takes 4 to 5 years from seed to the first flower, and then 5 to 10 years trialling it to make sure that it's going to be a good, sound variety for your garden.
Because I suppose it's all very well if they look beautiful, but what you want is more than that, isn't it?
It's what we look for in a new variety.
Yeah.
Is good foliage, a good grower. The flowers need to be above the foliage so that you can see the flowers nicely and have a good long life.
What do you start off with? Do you say, oh, I like that and I like that? Or do you have this idea in your head of what you want to create?
Well, you have an idea, and that's why you use selective parents.
Yeah.
But as the man said, you dream of things that never were and say, why not?
You're quite on the cutting edge of daffodil breeding, aren't you? What's the fashion? Which direction are these daffodils going in?
The real fashions and the hopes at the moment are multi-head ones, different colours, white and reds, white and pinks, and also the split corollas. Some of the more modern ones, there are stunning shapes and colours. There's a lot of things to come.
Yeah, but I bet there'll be quite a few Ron Scamp daffodils.
Well, I hope so. I always say it's 40% research, 60% inspiration. Yes. And a lot of luck.
These are cabbages that either have started to bolt and never got eaten, or never really developed a head, and now it's too late to eat them. So, time to clear them and create space for another set of crops. And here are some other jobs that you can be getting on with this weekend.
It's a good time now to prune figs. All this year's crop is already present as tiny pea-sized fruit on the shoots. So if you remove all this growth, you won't get any figs this year. However, take out any crowded or crossing branches and try to create a shape that is as flat against a wall or fence as you can, and this will mean that as much light and air will get to the plant as possible. Once your amaryllis has finished flowering, don't throw them away, as with the right care, they'll flower again next year. Cut off the spent flower heads to stop the energy going into seeds. You can leave the stem on, although I prefer to remove it simply because it looks better. But let the leaves fully develop and don't remove them. Water it weekly and give it a general purpose feed every week or two. And then when the risk of frost has completely gone, you can stand it outside in a sheltered spot. If you've stored your dahlias over winter, it's time to take them out and check them over. Make sure none of the tubers are rotten or have dried out, and if they have, discard them. Pot up the good tubers so the crowns are just proud of the surface of the soil. water them and put them somewhere warm, and this will encourage new shoots, which can then be used for cuttings.
Now, you may not be storing any dahlias, but it's still a good time to buy them and check them out using the same criteria. First of all, you must be able to see the tubers. If you can't see them, don't buy them. The second thing is feel them, give them a squeeze. They should feel firm. If they feel at all dried up or squidgy, don't buy them. I adore dahlias. They're a plant that grab people and dominate their lives. And I think Darren Everest in Kent would be proud to be included in that number.
Dahlias give you that splash of colour when the rest of the garden is starting to look a little bit tired. The dahlias come to life and they give you those flowers right from middle of July, right up to the first frosts. I love the variation in size. You can grow little ones which are no bigger than 2 inches across, right up to the giants, which are dinner plate size, and all the colours, a mixture of colours that you could possibly wish for. They've just got that wow factor. My earliest recollection of dahlias was when I used to walk down my granddad's garden and I saw rows of dahlias growing, lovely colours, and that's what sort of first got me interested in them. I started growing when I was probably about 11 or 12, and then more seriously from 15 I was showing at the national show in the novice classes. I just enjoy growing them. This variety is called Kenora Sunset. It's one of my favourites. I think you can guess why it's called Kenora Sunset. The blend of red and yellow is, I think, really quite stunning. When you're exhibiting dahlias, you normally have to have 3 in a vase, and they should all be exactly the same and matching. It's quite difficult to match because obviously they've got the different colours, and between each bloom there are differences. So when it comes to showing it, quite often the judges will go for a plain white or yellow as opposed to a bi-coloured, whereas I think to match 3 of these is far more of an achievement. I treat the dahlia world of exhibiting in the same way that I look at the sort of football leagues. You've got the Premier Division of the top growers, the same as the Man Uniteds and the Chelseas of the world. I like to put myself a bit further down the table where you get the odd victory against them. You do quite well in the other classes, but you know, I wouldn't want to be the best grower in the country, because when you just win the odd trophy, the satisfaction of winning is greater than if you was winning all the time. Really, what a dahlia needs is plenty of water. Early on in the season, some high nitrogen feed for a few weeks, and then a balanced feed, and then just as the flowers are starting to come out, a high potash feed. The main pest is an earwig, and I have a cunning little trick to stop that on all my flowers, which is petroleum jelly. Just get a little bit on your finger, and then just rub it up and down the stem for about 4 inches, or what's that, 10 centimetres, just below the flower, and that will stop the earwigs from climbing up the stem and chomping on your prize-winning flowers. This year I've got 660 plants. All my spare time, certainly this time of year, is spent up at the allotment. You know, probably on average 3 hours a day. You need to spend the time with them to get them to a really good standard. My wife is exceptionally supportive. Even my children come up and help. It's very difficult letting other people, whether it's even my own children, touch my flowers, because they're precious to me. But over time, I'm hoping that at least one will take up the challenge, because there aren't the growers there anymore, and that's a real shame. You know, I'm all for trying to get people to start growing them. If one of the 3 take it up, then I've done a good job.
To see Darren's allotment filled with dahlias. It's a very old-fashioned English site. It's beautiful. But then, of course, they're beautiful in a border, too. Now, talking of borders, the other day I took the box hedging that surrounded the grass borders out and burnt it because it had box blight. And we all felt pretty glum about it. But the borders are better. Light has got in, we can see the grasses thoroughly. I think it looks much better without the hedge around it. I will be going over the borders, removing some of the dead material, splitting plants and adding some more plants to fill the space where the hedges were. So what was a pretty sad day, in fact, has evolved into an exciting opportunity.
Now, I've got another major task. This corner is a sun trap and has very free-draining soil, so it makes an ideal space for a dry garden. And at its best, it can and has looked fantastic. But in recent years, some of the plants have become unruly and have taken over.
All the gems that love this extreme drainage and baking sun have got crowded out. And what I'm going to do is what you can do in any border, in any situation, not just a dry border, is to take everything out that can reasonably be moved, take out all the weeds, refresh the soil, and then put back all the plants that I want to keep, and then see where the gaps are and think about adding other things. One of the biggest thugs is Acanthus mollis. For a few years, this would grow and then get knocked back in winter. It tended to be really hit by frosts in February and March, but of course we haven't had that this year. So the best thing to do is to cut off all this top growth. The roots, however, need to be extracted because every single scrap will grow back. This is getting a little wet. I think it's time for a cup of tea. And while I'm doing that, you can see Glen Shapiro's stunning dry garden in Lancashire that Joe visited last summer.
For many years, rock gardens have been a popular feature. But what do you do if your garden is made of nothing but rock? Well, I'm here to meet a gardener whose pioneering spirit has created something really special out of solid stone. Here in Silverdale, North Lancashire, hard limestone has created a unique craggy landscape, so gardening here isn't for the faint-hearted.
But that didn't deter Glen Shapiro and her husband when they moved here 32 years ago.
I remember him saying the disadvantage is there isn't a garden and there isn't even anywhere to put a garden. I just smiled quietly to myself.
You could see the potential, even though it was absolutely covered in scrub.
Oh, without a doubt. It was just a really exciting challenge.
Yeah.
Limestone rock is just the most beautiful rock for a rock garden.
Should we go and explore?
Yes, I'd love to show you it. There is a magical staging about a rock garden that you will never achieve with anything else. It's very, very sculptural, very three-dimensional. I was a sculptor originally, and that's the way I like to think of it.
The way you move through the space and see things in 3D.
Absolutely.
You've got very thin soil, and actually in a lot of the garden, you've got no soil at all, just pure rock. How easy is it to establish plants? If someone at home has got, the same conditions, how do you get them going in the first place?
I build up soil in the fissures between the rocks, and that's the good place to get your taller shrubs and dwarf pines and things going. And then there are what we call runnels, the narrower bits where the water is draining into the fissures. So you can get slightly larger plants, maybe dianthus and things going in those quite nicely.
They're almost like little containers. They're like a little pot.
Absolutely.
So you're gauging the plant that you can put in to the size of the hole. Is that right?
Yes, yes. And then when it comes to no soil, there's things like your silver saxifrages. Often just a bit of wet moss in a crack is enough to start them. They form a little carpet. You can break bits off. And I'll have a little spell of going around and sticking them in here, there and everywhere. They just look so natural in a garden like this. They're ideal. It's great
These
fun.
orangiums, at the moment, they're stunning. I love the colour of them and the way they reflect the light.
This particularly dry area suits them very well.
Yeah. What strikes me is the range of plants you've got here. People would see a garden like this and see the limitations and think, oh, I can only grow a few things, but you've really extended that palette out to create an all-year-round garden.
Yes, definitely so. Well, I'm busy in it all year round, so let's have it looking good.
Now, I know the garden doesn't finish here. Should we keep moving?
Yes.
What a lovely spot this is, isn't it? It's like a destination point after, well, a mini climb, I guess. But it's almost like a garden in reverse, because up here you've got a traditional lawn and you've got a pond and a very different feel.
You don't see the rockery at all from the top. This is the sort of ha-ha effect. And then as you look over, it's a complete surprise again.
It reveals as though you would never know it was there from here at all.
I think it's just lovely to work with the materials you've got on site.
What would your advice be to someone who's got, well, let's face it, a pretty difficult spot to make a garden in?
Go with the landscape you've got. Make sure that it fits into the surrounding area and sits happily within it, and go for the plants that are happy in that terrain. Don't fight it.
Very good advice, I'd say. You've created an absolutely stunning garden here.
I couldn't agree more with Glenn Shapiro. The best gardening advice of all is go with the conditions. Plant what wants to grow, and you're almost certain to make a decent garden out of it. Now, the rain has backed off. I have a feeling it might come back a bit, so I'm pushing on. Well, let's start with the hardest first. So the plan is to dig out the central core of this acanthus, taking as much root as I can. And you can see that just slicing through, you've got these very fleshy roots, and every little bit will create a new plant, which is why I can be quite cavalier about chucking some of this away. I want to move on just to another plant. I've got some bearded iris here. They've been divided and moved, they're very healthy, but there is couch grass in amongst them. And while I'm revamping a border like this, it's tempting to leave the iris, but I need to remove the couch grass. Now is the time to do it. I'm being quite gentle because I don't want to damage the roots. And the less I can disturb them and the less I can damage them, the better. Now, you can see, look at all that couch grass in there. That's all got to come out. And couch is one of those weeds, like bindweed, like ground elder, that once it gets into a border, it can only spread. You're never going to contain it. See, I've just got a handful of couch grass just from this one here. Don't put this on the compost heap. And I can pot that up. But when you lift a plant out temporarily, you want to do so as an entity. So, for example, if we take this sedum here, which I can dig up and keep a nice root ball on it, a bit of tansy interwoven in it, which I'll gently tease out. If you can keep a root ball right round it, and we're giving this a little weed while we're about it, just checking, taking out the tansy out of the roots. It doesn't really matter what compost you use. It's rough and ready, but that will be good for replanting, as I say, for a couple of weeks, and it will hardly notice that it's been moved. Make sure that it's watered and in reasonable shade, and that can sit until you're ready to replant it. When I've refreshed the soil, I'll be putting back the plants I've taken out and also adding in plants, because here in the dry garden, it's really important only to put in plants that will relish baking sun and really sharp drainage. But that's it for this week. Bye-bye. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. I'm just digging over this plot of ground which has been empty for the last few weeks because I lifted brassica that I had growing in here. And with all the rain that we had in January and February, it got very compacted. It's amazing how rain will compact bare soil. And by turning it over, you're opening it out, you're letting air in, and then you can just rake it over, maybe mulch it, and it's ready to sow. So just give that compacted ground a nice turn.
This week, Carol returns to our novice gardeners, Dan and Dominique, to help them with the next stage of their year-long garden transformation, which is laying a lawn.
Right, who's going to do what?
I'll go get the turf.
I'll get the knife.
Yeah, and I'll watch.
Hydrangeas have long been out of fashion, but now seem to be making something of a resurgence. And Rachel visits Treba, a Cornish valley garden, with a stunning collection of hydrangeas.
When you stand here, the sheer scale of it all is absolutely breathtaking.
Now the grass borders have been freed from the bounds of box. They are actually looking better already. It's amazing how if you remove a barrier, you just see so much more, even if it was quite a low one. But at this time of year, they've finished their winter display. Grasses are fabulous between October and the end of February. But once you get into March and April, they do start to look a little bit tired. So before I can think about how I'm going to develop them, plant some more grasses, plant some more companion plants, I need to do a bit of housekeeping. And I've got a letter here from Barbara. If I put my glasses on, I can see where you live, Barbara. Right, you're in Lincolnshire. Now, dear Monty, I made up a rhyme to remind me if I should prune grasses. Can you tell me if I'm on the right track? If it's green, keep it keen. If it's brown, cut it down. And by keeping it keen, I mean I'd only trim off any dead grass, otherwise leave it alone. And if it's brown or dead, I should cut it right down. But should I be careful of the new grass? Please let me know, as there are so many grasses to keep track of. Well, there are lots of different grasses, which is a good thing, because it gives you lots of choice. But essentially, there are only two ways of dealing with them, and you're spot on. And the two different types of grasses are either deciduous, this is Calamagrostis Carl Forster, and it has strong, upright green growth, and then these plumes of flower. But they're over now, so all of this last year's growth can be cut. And I could, if I'd done this about a month earlier, cut it right to the ground. As it is, I don't want to cut off the new growth, so I'll cut it up about that high. But this plant here, this is Stipa gigantea, has these wonderful, tall oat heads that typically catch the sun as it slants across the sky. One of my favourite plants of all. And this is an evergreen grass. And you can see that you've got all last year's growth is still green. Now, there is some dead in it, but rather than cut that out, what you do is what I'm doing now. You just put your hands in and pull it out. So you get handfuls, it comes away, and what doesn't come away, you leave in. Like combing through like that. Whereas with the calamagrostis, I need to get a little bit more drastic. So we'll cut about there. But you can see I've left about a foot of new growth. Now, this is a job to get on with, because if that new growth grows too high, you're going to be left with an ugly, awkward mixture of old and new tangled in together. So if you're growing grasses and they need cutting back, do it this weekend. There's been a robin following me around the garden, and he's perched there. He's really singing. Can you hear him? Now, all these grasses, whether they be evergreen or deciduous, are grown for border effect. They're individual, they're dramatic. They're plants that need special attention. But this week, Carol has gone down to Gloucestershire, to the new garden she's helping to create, to use grass in rather a different way.
This year, I'm helping new homeowners Dan and Dominique create a practical family garden. They know what they want: a lawn for their daughter to play on, some flowers to enjoy, and an area to entertain in. Since my last visit, they've got really stuck in. They've been busy moving their raised beds, clearing perennial weeds, had a wall built and set out a new path. Dan and Dom decided on a straight path to link the house to their parking, and it had to be wide enough for a buggy. What we're doing today is going to make a vast difference. Today, we're laying a lawn. I can't believe how much this place has changed. So this is the site of the lawn. Yes, this is it.
Yep.
Yeah. Last summer was so gorgeous, and actually we couldn't really get
Spend much
outside
time
with
outside.
her. So it'd be brilliant to be able to eat out here, have picnics out here.
You've bought turf.
We've bought turf. It arrived this morning.
I quite like the instant sort of gratification of it.
Yeah, knowing what's going down.
Yeah.
Seeing it done at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
And it's a good time of year to do it, either autumn or spring, are perfect times. So the first thing to do is to try and make sure that you've got a level surface. It won't do itself, come on. Without preparing the ground properly, there's always a risk that the lawn could fail. It's best to dig over the area and firm it down. Dan and Dom have already done that, so all that's needed is to rake it over, get rid of the last stones and bumps before marking out with sand. Shall we lay some turf?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah?
That looks good.
Yeah. Just stack them beyond, or...?
You want to start from that end?
I'm a bit nervous.
Right. The moment of truth.
We're lucky because we've got a path to work from. This is the edge you've got to worry about. Forget about the other side, because we can adjust that.
Hey, look at that.
Yeah, and you want, if anything, a slight overlap, but you must make sure that these are really butted up next to one another. Look at that. You can't see the seam. Okay. So let's use this straight line right the way along. Newly laid turf is fragile and shouldn't be walked over, so to protect it, we're putting down a plank. There's our join, somewhere around here, can't see it. So we're going to do it just like your path. We're going to stagger these so you never get two joints in line, because then they tend to shrink away from each other. Turf, please, maestro. Using turf means the lawn can appear before our eyes. Sowing grass seed is cheaper, but Dan and Dom want an established lawn quickly.
It's looking all right.
It's wonderful you've got a lawn. I'm worried about this little bit, though, because it's so tempting just to cut a tiny triangle and put it in. But then you'll have a small piece of turf with 3 edges. It's going to dry, shrivel up.
Right.
So I think we ought to cut right back into this one and get a whole new turf and roll it out and then trim back to our edge. Right, who's going to do what?
I'll go get the turf.
I'll get the knife.
Yeah, and I'll watch. Ready? That's it. What a team. Look!
Very good.
It's great.
We haven't quite finished yet. Next, we tamp down the turf, making sure all the roots are in close contact with the soil. We don't want the turf to dry out, so Dan and Dominique will continue to water it for the next few weeks until it's established. I think it looks utterly fantastic.
It's great. Yeah.
It does, doesn't it? But that's just the centrepiece. This is the next task ahead.
Yeah.
And a lovely one too. Hopefully we're going to grow all sorts of brilliant, big, gorgeous plants in here.
Yeah, colour and texture and...
Various heights, up and down. Yeah.
Yeah. But first of all, we need to do something with the soil. So fortunately, I've brought you some bags of muck. Well-rotted manure, garden compost or bags of organic material from the garden centre will help open up the structure of this heavy clay soil. Incorporating compost or muck adds air and nutrients, giving all the wonderful range of bacteria and creatures that make soil healthy the opportunity to thrive. Well, what a smashing day. We've achieved such a lot and we've really got the garden off to a flying start. But it's a special day in other ways too. It's Dan's birthday and I've got a bit of a surprise.
Oh, wow.
And what a wonderful way to celebrate with our first garden party. We can leave digging the rest of the garden for another day, but it'll need doing soon because on my next visit we'll be shopping for beautiful structural trees and shrubs to get the planting started in their borders. Cheers!
Cheers!
Happy birthday!
Birthday.
It's impressive to see how much Dan and Dominique have already done. At the rate they're going, they're going to have a really nice garden by summertime. Now, I think this is a really nice area. In fact, it's one of my favourite areas at Longmeadow. And to develop it and move it on, I need to add plants. And one of the ways of doing that, of course, is dividing and moving around what's already here. Now, I'm going to split this Calamagrostis. It is worth stressing that you should not move or divide grasses when it's cold. So if you're in any doubt, wait another month. I think the soil is warm enough, but this is the absolute earliest I would do it. Just cut down around the edge of the plant and don't divide them into too small pieces. And I'm just going to halve this. They will take much better if they're bigger. Having cut round half of the outside, I'm simply going to cut across it. And grasses don't have very extensive roots, or at least most of them don't. So you don't need to worry too much about taking out a great big root ball. So I'm going to try and take that out in one chunk. There we go. And I'm going to put it in the front of the border, where the hedge was, because I don't want the grasses just tearing up like a pyramid. I want to have to look through some taller ones from the front. Don't want it too deep. Right. When you move any grass or plant it for the first time, it is really important to give it a good soak. It's had a good drink. I think it will grow perfectly well in its new home. But it's starting to rain, and the next phase of creating plants for this border is thankfully going to take place in the potting shed. Grasses can be quite expensive to buy, but if you grow them from seed and raise your own plants, well, you can raise hundreds for not very much. This costs about £2. Not a lot of seed, probably about 50 or 60. If all these germinated, I've got about £500 worth of plants in here. I like grasses in their own right. I think they're very beautiful. I think they're very sensuous. I love the sound they make. But they also make a really good foil for a whole range of flowers that you might broadly call prairie planting. And you can grow those from seed too. And I'm going to be sowing some Verbena bonariensis on the basis that it's almost impossible to imagine a garden with too much Verbena bonariensis in. That is one of the archetypal plants that goes well with grasses. So sprinkle them on the surface of compost. I've mixed this compost myself, which has got plenty of drainage. That's quite important. I suppose a slight warning of Verbena, it is erratic in germination. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes some of them do, and the rest don't seem to be doing, but they come later. I've also got Rudbeckia in here, Rudbeckia laciniata. Heleniums grow really well with grasses. Any umbellifer, any tall daisy flower looks fantastic with grasses, particularly towards the end of summer. Where you have tiny seeds sprinkled on the surface of the compost, they're very prone to being spread by water. If you water them with a watering can, the seeds just get scattered sideways. So it's a good idea to water from below and put the seed trays in to soak. Leave them there for about 5 to 10 minutes. The compost will absorb the moisture like blotting paper, and that's all the seeds need in order to germinate. Now, grasses have become very trendy in the last 10 to 15 years. But Rachel's been to Cornwall to look at a plant which definitely has gone out of fashion in my lifetime. But perhaps it's making a comeback.
For me, there are very few plants that conjure up such a sense of romance and nostalgia as the hydrangea. Just these enormous blooms in pastel colours. I remember them in every single suburban garden where I grew up. They're all about long summer days. For so many years, it was the shrub gardeners all over Britain relied on to provide beautiful late summer blooms. But taste changed and the hydrangea fell out of favour. These days, we're starting to rediscover it. But if you still need convincing, then Treba Gardens in Cornwall is the place to do it. Oh, right at the heart of this subtropical paradise is this V-shaped valley, and at the bottom, a slow-moving river that acts like a mirror for clouds of hydrangeas along the banks. And when you stand here, the sheer scale of it all is absolutely breathtaking. The hydrangeas were planted at the height of the shrub's popularity back in the 1950s by the then owners, the Martin family, and they've been looked after by head gardener Darren Dickey for the last 20 years. Why have you got so many hydrangeas?
The hydrangeas were actually planted by the Martin family. Originally planted for a display, but also with a secondary interest. They actually planted them for cut flowers to send up to Covent Garden. It was a way of generating a bit of extra income to help pay for the garden team that were maintaining the estate.
So pretty much almost grown as a crop?
Pretty much, yeah. They were harvested, sent up in flower boxes on the trains.
Why are they so successful in coastal gardens?
I think the great thing about hydrangeas is they have a deciduous nature in the winter. So when the worst of the winter weather comes in and you get the salt winds sort of blowing in from the coast and off the sea, obviously those plants are in naked form, they don't need any protection, so they don't get scorched or damaged by the weather. Once they start to come through in sort of March and April, the weather is a little bit more benign, and they tend to thrive.
I think one of the things that many people find most fascinating about hydrangeas is the colour range and then how you achieve these different colours. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you'll see, obviously, the hydrangeas at Treba are varying different shades. The acidity of the soil is the main sort of contributing factor to the colour of the hydrangeas. The soil we have here is an acidity of about pH of about 6. So obviously you're going to get the good sort of blue colours coming through. But you'll also see a few variations from that. You'll see them running through from blue through to pink, even on the same bush. That's quite often where it's sort of picking up traces of sort of alkalinity.
How can you try and get a bluer hydrangea? That's something I'm often asked.
Yeah, I mean, you can get bluing agents, which is basically aluminium sulfate, which you can add to the soil. But the trouble with that is obviously it's going to leach out of the soil, so you're going to have to maintain that every year.
Does it also help to start with either a really good pink or a really good blue, if that's what you want to continue with?
That's a very good point, actually, and we often say to people if they are looking to get the really good blues, if you start off with a really sort of dark blue, particular ones, hydrangea Enzian, which is a really good dark blue, you're on the right track. Likewise, if you're going for the pinks, then obviously start off with a good pink form, which will then give you the best chance to actually maintain that.
Now, this one looks really very different from the ones we've been looking at down in the valley.
Yeah, this is Hydrangea asper from the Velosa group of hydrangeas. It's rather nice. It has a more sort of lax form, lovely soft felty leaves, which are very sort of tactile, and these beautiful flowers which attract the insects. It's one of my favourites.
Hydrangeas did go through the doldrums a little bit, didn't they? Have you seen evidence here that they're regaining their popularity?
I think there certainly are signs of that. We've seen that in our plant sales here, that some of the more unusual cultivars that are coming onto the market, especially those with very deep colours, ones with coloured stems, and some of those sort of really deep pinks are becoming very fashionable.
It's hard to choose when you're in hydrangea heaven, but this one, Zorro, has really caught my eye. These inky black stems, and then you've got the green of the foliage, and rather horizontal, ultraviolet flowers. It's such a stunning and striking combination. And I'm so pleased that hydrangeas are once again gaining in popularity. They deserve to. There's definitely something for every garden.
I get asked a lot about hydrangeas, and the question's always based around two things. One is, when do I prune them? And two is, why aren't mine flowering? And the two are connected. Lacecap and mophead hydrangeas, which are the most common, produce their flowers on older wood. So you don't prune them hard. In fact, don't prune them at all until this time of year. Leave the old flowers on, don't touch them over winter. And then in April, just deadhead them. Cut back to a bud, no more than an inch or two below the flower head. And that's all you need do. If you've got a very overgrown plant, you can take out the bigger stems right down to the ground. And then it will throw up new stems which won't produce flowers this year, but it will help reshape the plant. So that's the first type of hydrangea. There is another type which needs pruning a little bit differently. I have here a Hydrangea paniculata, and this is different because it produces its flowers on new growth. So these flowers from last year, and you can just see there were quite a few, all were developed on wood that grew last year. So if I leave it unpruned, it will just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the flowers will get growing and growing and growing at the top. So what I need to do is develop a framework from which new wood can come. So I'm going to tip this back that far, and this one back here. So we want to take that off there. This can just come off there. And that's crossing, so we'll remove that. Now, what I would stress is that if you've got a hydrangea and you're not 100% certain what type or variety it is, just deadhead it now and don't prune it, and you'll do no harm. Watch it carefully, and then if you see that all the flowers are produced on new growth that wasn't there until this spring and summer, then you can prune it harder next year. Now, you may not grow hydrangeas, but here are some other jobs you can be doing this weekend.
Some plants that are otherwise lovely have a habit of outgrowing their welcome, and Lysimachia ciliata firecracker has done just that in the jewel garden. I still want it, but only up to a point. Whilst you can still move around your borders without doing too much damage, get in and thin back any plants that are taking over. Be ruthless. You'll be improving the overall look as well as creating space for other plants. The foliage of elders look great in a border. This is Sambuca's Southern Gold, but you can get elders with foliage ranging from deep purple to brilliant green. To get the best from them, you need to prune them back hard at this time of year. Cut back to a knobbly stub of old growth, and then the new shoots will bear especially vibrant new leaves. It's a good time to take fuchsia cuttings. And if you don't have a fuchsia, it's also a good time to buy one, as the nurseries and garden centres now have the widest range of varieties. Choose a strong new shoot without a flower bud. Remove all but a couple of leaves and place it in a free-draining compost around the edge of a pot. Put it somewhere warm but out of direct sunlight. Water it and make sure it never fully dries out, and it should root in a few weeks' time.
Now, I'm going to plant my first potatoes in here. This is Charlotte, which is a second early. And that's because raised beds warm up much quicker than open ground, so they're ready. I wouldn't put them quite yet in open ground because that's colder. And the techniques are very different. For years, I planted potatoes in the same way. I dug a deep V-shaped trench, put compost along the bottom, spread out the spuds, and then made a ridge over the top of them. That does take a lot of space. And if you're short of space, raised beds work very well indeed. The reason why is you can plant them closer together, and you don't need any space between the rows. And all you have to do is just make a hole and pop the potato in. And you can see that these are chitted. The sprouts are green and quite firm instead of the long translucent sprouts you get when you leave potatoes in a cupboard at this time of year. And once those are planted and they go in the dark, they will grow with extra energy. And just pop them in about 6 inches under and space them as close as about a foot apart. The closer you space them together, the smaller the potatoes will be. Now, for early potatoes, and this is Charlotte, as I say, a second early, small potatoes don't matter. It's the taste you're going for. For a main crop, which you'll harvest in September, October, or even November, bigger ones might be more practical, so you give them more space. Just cover them over. And unless it's very cold and I need to protect them with a bit of straw, if we have frosts in May, there's nothing else I need to do to these. And the goal is that by my birthday, beginning of July, I'll be able to harvest a delicious meal of new potatoes. And believe you me, no potatoes you ever eat are as good as those first ones you harvest from your own plot. Well, that's it for today. Bye-bye.